All right, so let me introduce you to Dr. Christine is an Associate Dean, okay, of Teaching and Learning at the Faculty of Business and Law at Deakin University. All right, Christine is a chartered accountant who has worked for various roles before joining Deakin in 2015. All right, this role includes as an auditor in one of the big four, as both a financial and management accountant in a large corporation, as well as consultant for many small businesses. Okay, so Christine, over to you.
Thanks very much, and welcome everyone, and thank you, Abdi, for the opportunity to speak on this collaboration and the outcomes, and to say that it was a lot of fun and we've enjoyed the process. So I've got the easy task today because I'm introducing what we did and why we did it, and Edwin's going to do the hard task of showing you the underlying principles that were employed. So we're looking at R&D, and we're looking at R&D particularly with a capital budgeting focus. So the key objectives of the module is to allow business students to apply the capital budgeting concepts to evaluate projects, to understand how successful versus unsuccessful R&D projects can affect corporate reporting, particularly taking an IFRS approach, and then looking at preparing the analysis using a spreadsheet. So also giving financial modelling tasks, skill development. So why capital budgeting? Well, capital budgeting is really important. In all businesses, there's normally scarce funds to invest. So in most situations, there'll be more projects that are available for funding than funding available. So an analysis needs to be undertaken. So capital budgeting is a really important task for accountants and often also slips into a finance decision. And so capital budgeting is an important skill for students to know. We chose to apply this to R&D because research and development has major impacts on the business. So once we invest our capital or our funding, it's a long-term decision. It's really costly to change and difficult to change. And so therefore it can have a large impact on future profitability. So if we don't get the capital budgeting decision right and invest in the right projects, then the future performance of the business is going to be significantly impaired. So the module enables students to analyse a range of projects. The analysis is done on Excel, so it develops Excel skills, and it allows students to put some theory into practice. So what's always been done in class is that we give students little exercises where they look at one project and they work out whether this is a viable project or not. It's very divorced from reality. So by putting capital budgeting and in the R&D module into MonsoonSIM, we're allowing students to actually see the impact of the analysis that they do. So outside of the module, they would actually calculate which is a viable project from a number of different projects available. They then invest in the project they think gives the best return to the organisation, and then they get to see how this plays out in the future. And because it's an R&D component or project that they're analysing, it actually has very fast implications on the profit and loss if a mistake is made in the analysis. So this is a really rich topic for educators because it enables us to look at the Excel spreadsheet. It asks students to consider the impacts of different cash flow financing options, over the years, as you would in the real world. It enables conversations around discount rates that are appropriate for the various investments that can happen. And it also enables the development of an understanding of how we account for R&D under the International Financial Reporting Standards. So this is the first part of a module that's being linked to the Intellectual Capital Integrated Reporting, which is a project that's still coming. And this, of course, links into a focus of the International Reporting Council to look at how companies can create value in their organisation, looking not just at financial capitals, but looking across 6 different capitals. More of that to come in November. So when we look at research and development is also critical for a company's future. It's not good enough just to stay with what you've got. A company needs to continually evolve its products or its processes. So companies need to increase their R&D spending to make sure that they meet market pressures, the demand for new products or innovative approaches to factors in the marketplace. They need to be competitive. They've got to differentiate. So they need to be able to enhance their capability of the company, and it allows for future growth. So a successful R&D project contributes to the continued sustained financial performance of a business. So whether we're making more sales, increasing profit, enabling a greater market share, being seen in the marketplace, you know, it's being of benefit to shareholders, that if you have an innovative company that's coming up with new ideas, that you can actually see that the share price will really grow in that company and it gets a presence in the marketplace. It also can allow, depending on what you invest in, for productivity gains and help to reduce expenses in the organisation. But of course, the problem with any R&D project is there is a lag between when the project starts and we start to realise our economic benefits. In practice, that can be over a number of years. Of course, in the terms of the simulation, we don't play for a number of years, we play for a number of days. And so we've set the days where the analysis of the project takes place 15 days after the actual investment is made. So students will have the opportunity or be offered at the choice of the instructor or of a number of R&D projects. They need to analyse firstly if they have the cash flow to invest in any of the projects, and if they do, which is the project that is best for them. So that requires analysis of the different characteristics of the projects available. They then commit to the project. And then after 15 days, they then determine, the game determines whether this was a successful investment or not. And if it is successful, it means it's increased profitability for the organisation moving forward. But if it's not a successful investment, it means the cost of that investment is going to hit the profit and loss immediately. So all R&D projects are risky. There's high failure rates. We see that in the marketplace, and that will depend on a number of uncertainties that happen in the market that can't be perceived. And in the simulation, there's a number of uncertainties around whether we've got a really bullish or bearish market. And so there's factors that the participants have to take into account. And so what we're trying to encourage is students to take a thoughtful, prudent approach to their project selection, and that they have a little bit of luck, and that they also understand how capital budgeting supports the decisions made within an organisation about its long-term future. Now, R&D is an important intangible asset under the International Accounting Standard number 38. So we have two components of this intangible asset. We have research and development. So when we're looking at research, we're really looking at the expenditure on a potential project. So we're seeking, investigating, searching for new potential products or processes that's going to make our business work better, sell more. And therefore, there is no guarantee at this stage that there's economic benefits. And because we don't have that understanding of the available economic benefits, it's hard to measure what the total costs of this will be. At this point, expenditure is always recognised as an expense. So as we undertake expenditure on research type activities, they're an immediate hit to profit and reduce our profitability. In comparison, if you have a successful research project, you can move into the development aspect of the project. In the development stage, you actually know what you're going to or aiming to achieve. So it's a real project, and you're applying your research findings to actually plan or design a module. So the development happens after the research phase has been completed, but before the production or use of the product or the process has started. And so at this stage, it's critical whether this is going to be successful or not. If this is not successful, all the development costs are also going to end up in the profit and loss account as an expense. If it is successful, then the development expenditure is going to be an intangible asset in the statement of financial position or the balance sheet, and it's going to continue to provide benefits for the organisation over time. So there's 6 key conditions that must be satisfied before we can capitalise a development cost as an intangible asset. This is that it's going to be probable that we're going to get economic benefits from the project, that we've got the capability and the intention to complete the project, and we've got the resources to be able to do that, that it's technically feasible, and that we can reliably measure the expenditure. And so these indicators suggest whether the project's going to be successful and give us future economic benefits. So at this point, it's critical under the game as to whether your profit takes a huge hit or whether you move forward with your profitable project. So all in all, this enables students to consider two key aspects of running a business: the capital budgeting aspect and the managing and decisions around research and development, and the impact they can have on the long-term profitability of the business. And I'm going to hand over to Edwin.
Thank you, Christine and Abdi, and good afternoon to everyone. So over the next few slides, I'm going to present how students can actually apply the capital budgeting concept, particularly the net present value method, and utilize the financial modeling function in Excel to efficiently determine the NPV of each project and also to appraise each investment. And we will also demonstrate how a business financial performance and position will be affected differently by successful versus unsuccessful R&D. So hopefully this can give you some basic but clear understanding of how capital budgeting and R&D corporate reporting can be integrated into students' learning. So really, in MonsoonSIM, we have configured a number of R&D projects available for students to choose from. And we actually assume that all these R&D projects are innovative, so they can help the business to distinguish themselves from competitors. But there are several fundamental questions. For example, whether these projects are equally profitable, whether these projects can generate economic benefits greater than cost in the long run. So we are taking a long-term perspective here. And whether teams should invest in all the R&D projects, or can they actually invest in more than one R&D project? So it's important to acknowledge that company has finite resources, so they have to operate under the cash constraints. It is not possible for business to invest in every single R&D project, and particularly because R&D is costly and risky at the same time. And we know that the R&D spending is going to actually affect the company's financial performance and position directly. So for example, the R&D spending and outcome will affect the company's profitability, liquidity, asset, and equity base at the same time. So it has real implications on cash flows and profitability. Taking an example here, so if the R&D is unsuccessful, as Christine mentioned, for unsuccessful R&D, both research and development expenditure have to be expensed. So this will actually reduce the company's profitability. And if the R&D is not successful, it's not going to generate any cash inflows or sufficient cash inflows in the next few years for the business. And the huge amount of cash spending will actually place the business into a very difficult situation, because business may not be able to pay off their short-term debts, including loans, accounts payable, and interest when they fall due. And some may actually breach the debt covenants imposed by banks and lenders, because we know that banks and lenders always want companies to keep certain ratios, for example, the quick asset ratio, current ratio, and debt to asset ratio. So by taking all this into consideration, it is very important that students are highly prudent and selective when it comes to the R&D investments. So we actually want students to apply the concept of capital budgeting to appraise each project to see whether this project is worth investing or whether it should be rejected. So capital budgeting is a very powerful tool when it comes to long-term business decisions that involve huge amount of cash spending. And we require students to actually conduct cost-benefit analysis for every project, taking a long-term perspective. And amongst all the capital budgeting methods, we actually emphasize the use of the net present value, the NPV method, because this method is one of the most common methods used in practice, and it is well taught in most business schools. So we have the common language, and we allow students to actually apply what they have learned in accounting and business finance studies. And of course, in real life, there will be other techniques that are available, such as average accounting return, payback, or internal rate of return, IRR, that requires a very complicated interpolation technique, but those are not really the focus of our module. So we just focus on the net present value method to keep the learning more focused and manageable. So let's go through one example here. So let's say for project A, it incurs research expenditure of 350K and 450K for development expenditure. So the total cash outflow for project A is 800K. Now, I need to reiterate that in MonsoonSIM, when we configure the game, we actually apply one very important assumption. So the time difference between the research expenditure and development expenditure is actually short. And we actually assume that research and development activities take place at the early days of the game, at the investment date, which is at the early days of the game, so we don't discount these cash flows, okay? Because in MonsoonSIM, there are no year concepts. We set the game up to 130 days, 145 days, for example, for the learners to play, but there are no year concepts. So for simplicity reason, for the research and development expenditure, we do not discount them, okay? However, we need to discount the projected cash inflow that happened at the end of each year and subsequent years. So for example, for project A, if this project is successful and only if it is successful, we anticipate that at the end of year 1, it will bring an additional 200K of cash flows to the company, followed by 436K, 374K, 390K, 436K over the next few years. So what we want students to do is to calculate the NPV. So mathematically, how do we calculate NPV? That is basically just the total projected discounted cash inflows minus the total projected discounted cash outflows. And to calculate the present value of each cash flow, we need to rely on the formula that you will see on the bottom part of the left-hand side of the slide. So PV equals to C divided by 1 plus R to the nth power. So C is the cash flow for a particular period, and R is the discount rate, that is the rate of return. So for every project, okay, so we will apply the same discount rate in MonsoonSIM. So for project A, for example, we actually apply 15% required rate of return. So required rate of return is basically the minimum return that is required by investors to invest in a particular project, okay? And N is just the number of periods. So let's take the projected cash inflow, okay? Let's discount the cash inflow at the end of year 1. So it's given that it's 200K, so we just put 200K as the numerator, divided by 1 plus R. So 15% means 0.15. So 1 plus 0.15, you get 1.15 to the power of 1. And you do the same thing for the second year cash flow, that is 436K, divided by 1.15 to the power of 2. And then for year 3, 374K divided by 1.15 to the power of 3. And for year 4, 390K divided by 1.15 to the power of 4. And in year 5, that is 436K divided by 1.15 to the power of 5. And finally, 436K for year 6 divided by 1.15 to the power of 6. Okay, so these are the total projected discounted cash inflows, and we deduct the total cash outflows. Okay, and remember, for the total cash outflows, we do not discount here because we assume that they take place at the earlier days of the game. So there is no need to discount it for simplicity. So after you have plugged in all the figures, you find that the NPV for this project is actually 577K. Will you invest in this project? So basically you will, because the net benefit for investing in this project is actually positive. So it is a promising investment and you will consider this investment. And of course, it's going to be quite time consuming for students to calculate this manually. So we will recommend students to actually calculate this using the financial modeling function in Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to demonstrate how this can be done. So basically, what students need to do is you encourage students to pre-populate all the information for every single project. So here I have project A to E, let's say, and I will pre-populate the research expenditure and development expenditure for each project, and I will just sum them up, okay? And I will also pre-populate the projected cash inflows for every year. And I will also have a discount rate, which is 15% in this example. So once your students have actually pre-populated this information, they can calculate the NPV very quickly. So to do this, you can just type equals to NPV. So we will use the existing function, which is inbuilt in Microsoft Excel. And then we open the brackets. We will choose the discount rate. And note, because we are using the same discount rate to evaluate, to appraise every project in this example, because we are using the same referencing point, we need to lock the cell. So to lock the cell, you can simply just add $sign. So $B, $15, add the $sign to the row and column. Okay, so we lock the cell because we are using the same discount rate for every project. And for project A, I would choose cell B6 to B13. Okay, and you may actually ask, why do I choose up to B13? Simply because I want to copy this formula across to other projects. Okay, so because if you have a look, project A actually has 6 years of cash inflows, and project E actually has 8 years of cash inflows. So to allow me to actually set up the modeling and copy the formula across efficiently, I would choose from B6 to B13. Okay, and of course, Excel is smart because once you leave these cells empty, they won't be incorporated in the calculation for project A, but they would do it for project E. Okay, so I will close the bracket, and here I get my NPV. Oh, sorry, I still have to minus a thing. I have to minus the total cash outflows. Okay, and remember we don't discount the total cash outflow in this case. So that gives me my net present value of $500,000. So 577K, which is consistent with what we have calculated previously. Okay, so once you have made sure that the formula is correct, you can just drag the formula across, and now you will see the NPV for each available project. So in this case, which project shall we invest? So if the business has a whole lot of cash, we will invest in project A, project C, and project E, right? Because they actually give us the positive NPV. But we would not actually invest in project B and project D because they have negative NPV. And for negative NPV in MonsoonSIM, we set them as failure. Okay, we set them as failed R&D. And of course, if the business has cash constraints, they cannot invest in more than one R&D. They have to go with the R&D project that gives the best NPV, which is project E in this example. Okay, so because project E has a greater positive NPV compared to project C and project A in this case. And of course, we can actually rely on this spreadsheet to further configure and to see the implications of
Edwin.
Yes.
Abdi here. I don't think can you share your Excel, because I think we are looking at your PowerPoint.
Oh, is it? I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Just I think they get the picture, but it's good for them to have a look.
Cool. Can you see my Excel now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I'm just going to demo this very quickly again. So what's happening is you will ask students to pre-populate the information for each project, including the research expenditure and development expenditure, and all the projected cash inflows in, and the required rate of return. So once you already have all this information ready, you can just type the formula in Excel, which is equals to NPV, open bracket, and you would choose the discount rate. And because we are using the same discount rate for every single project, we will lock this cell. And to lock this cell, you can actually put a $sign to the row and column. So $B, $15, for example, comma, and you will select the projected cash inflows. Okay, and here I select from B6 to B13. Okay. And I close the bracket, but this is not really the NPV because I still have to minus the total cash outflow, which is for the research and development expenditure, and that gives me 577K. So that is consistent with what we have calculated previously, that is shown in the slide. Okay, so when you have made sure that this formula is correct, you can just drag this formula across, so you can efficiently determine the NPV for each project. And in this case, if the company has a whole lot of cash, they can invest in project E, project C, and project A because they give the positive NPV. And you will avoid investing in project B and project D because they will be deemed as failed R&D, unsuccessful R&D given the negative NPV. And if the business has cash constraints, if they can only invest in one particular project, they will pick project E, because that actually gives the best and the highest figure for positive NPV. So based on this, we can further configure how the project is going to affect the company's financial performance and position, how they're going to affect various items on profit and loss and balance sheet. Okay, so for example, we can quote that, okay, to determine whether the project is successful, we can use the if function equals to if, and then we select the NPV that you have calculated just now, okay, and then comma. If this is successful, we give it 1, and if it is unsuccessful, we give it 0. Okay, so we know that, okay, project 1 is successful because it is positive, and then we just drag across. Okay, sorry, I haven't typed 0. Okay, so we will drag across this formula to the other cells. Hang on. Oh, sorry, if B17 is greater than 0. Okay, so let me rectify the formula. So we type if equals to if, open the bracket, okay, the NPV, if the NPV is greater than 0, then it is successful, which is coded 1, and 0 otherwise. Okay, so this gives you 1, and you drag across to the other columns. Okay, so it will tell you that for project A, project C, and project E, they are successful, but for project B and D, they are not successful. Okay, now, what happens if the project is successful? If the project is successful, MonsoonSIM will reward the teams with some sort of cash flows, and the cash inflows will equal to the projected cash inflow that are set for year 1. Okay, so in this case, since project A is successful, so if team invests in project A, they will get an extra revenue of 200K 15 days later. Okay, so to quote this, we can use the if function. Okay, if this is a successful project, okay, equals to 1. Okay, if the outcome equals to 1 means if it is successful, then I will have an extra revenue. So I refer to B6, that is the projected cash inflow in year 1, and 0 otherwise, because if it is unsuccessful, I will not get any cash inflows. Okay, so that's the way how it is configured in MonsoonSIM. So here consistently, I get my $200,000 for project A, and I'll get $200,000 for project C, and I will get $250,000 for project E. But I will not get anything for project B and for project D because they are unsuccessful R&D. Okay. Then when it comes to research expenditure, remember Christine mentioned that for all research expenditure, they must be expensed because it is too early to conclude that they are future economic benefits. So accounting standards require all research expenditure to be expensed. So here we can just simply equal to the research expenditure input. So I'll just click B2 and I press enter, and I will just drag this information across. Okay, so for all these projects, this is the amount that must be expensed for the research expenditure. And we also have to consider the development expenditure. And under IFRS, the development expenditure is expensed if it is not successful. If it fails to meet the 6 criteria mentioned by Christine and by Sandit, okay, so you have to expense them. So we can also use the if function. So if the outcome equals to 0, meaning if it is not successful, then we will select the development expenditure. So I pick B3, that is the development expenditure for for project A, and 0 otherwise. Okay. So if 0 otherwise means if it is successful, we do not have to expense the development expenditure. Okay. Now here you can see, because project A is successful, the development expenditure does not need to be expensed. It will be capitalized. It will be booked on balance sheet later. Okay, so we can just drag this formula across. So you find that for project B and for project D, because they are not successful, the development expenditure of 880K and 550K respectively are recorded here. Okay. So we have looked at what happens to the company's P&L for successful versus unsuccessful R&D. Now we're going to look at the implications on the balance sheet. Now, when you invest in R&D, definitely there will be a cash reduction. Okay, regardless of whether the R&D is successful or not, there will always be cash reduction. So that will equals to the sum of your research and development expenditure. Okay, so I pick B4 and I will just drag this across. Okay. And the next item will be the intangible asset account. Okay, so we have an account name called intangible development. That means if you see this, that means that, okay, the R&D that the team has chosen is successful. So the development expenditure of this project can be capitalized. So what we can do here is we also use the if function. If it is successful, if it is equals to 1, then we will capitalize the development expenditure, which is B3 for project A, and 0 otherwise, meaning if it is not successful, we cannot capitalize the development expenditure. Okay, so that gives you 450K for project A because it is successful. Okay, and then we drag this formula across, and we can see that for project C and for project E, because they are successful, their development expenditure are also recorded on balance sheet. But for project B and for project D, because they are unsuccessful, no development expenditure are actually recorded as an asset. Okay, and finally, if the project is successful, there will be extra cash inflow, there will be extra revenue. So that will simply equals to the sales revenue if it is successful. So equals to B21, and I will drag this formula across. Okay. So you find that there are really a lot of opportunities that you can consider, a lot of possibilities that you can consider in designing your curriculum and also your assessments for the students by integrating the capital budgeting and R&D reporting decisions. Okay, so hopefully this gives you some basic and clear idea before Abdi actually demo the game.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. Let me just say a few words about Edwin. Edwin is the senior lecturer in Department of Accounting in Deakin Business School. Edwin is a CPA with a significant academic and practical experience providing integrated teaching and research across a range of topics, including financial accounting, auditing, corporate governance, business strategy, and capital markets. And for this particular feature, I learned a lot from Edwin, I must say. The spreadsheet that he has shown earlier, it started. We started with a model, with a spreadsheet, and finally end up in MonsoonSIM, which I'm really happy. I think you're going to put it in your capstone project.
Yes, we are. It will go through into our T3 class, which will start in November. It won't be me in T3. Edwin, I hand the baton to Edwin in T3.
Back to me.
So it's back to Edwin, but yes, we intend to be using it. We are less focused, I guess, on the competition than some of the other universities, maybe because of our distance. But so we do see this as a really important skill for students to develop.
Yes, yes, and I'd like to thank you guys so much for this collaboration. I mean, it has enriched the MonsoonSIM features especially in the accounting side. And not only that, I think I also get some input here and there from Dr. Edwin about certain naming, and we have also improved along. So thank you so much.
And good for us too.
Yeah, it's okay. Edwin, Christine, any other things to add?
No, I think we've covered it all.
That's really good. Thank you so much.
And we thank you too for such a fruitful collaboration. And we look forward to our next product.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Lovely to speak to everybody.
Yes. Thank you both, and thank you everyone for coming.